Welcome to Provocative Conversations from Twice 5 Miles Radio. I'm your host, James Navé. Today, my guest is from Asheville. He's one of the 12 TEDxAsheville speakers who will appear at Diana Wortham Theatre on March the 20th, 2026. His name is David Huff. He's a business consultant. He's an environmentalist. He's an outdoor explorer and also a writer and a thinker. As I said, David is going to be on the stage at TEDxAsheville, and I was on the committee to choose the speakers. So I was part of the ones responsible for picking David as one of the 12 speakers. One thing I like to do is to interview as many of these speakers as possible, put them on air so you can hear them, get a sense of their process, also get a sense of how they might go about developing a TEDx talk. If you've ever thought of giving a TED talk, then this interview might be interesting for you. Not so much because it gives a sense of how to build a talk. It will just give you an insight into how the thinking proceeds before you put the talk together. So what's coming up is my conversation with David Huff. We touch on his experience in Hurricane Helene, which hit Asheville a little bit more than a year ago, and also his experiences in the wilderness and his thinking around business and culture and other things that are important right now. So I began this by asking him to give us a sense of who he is, what he's about, and why he would like to give a TEDxAsheville talk. So here's our conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Know that you have been chosen to be one of the 12 speakers at TEDxAsheville, which is happening in March. And you also have been involved for years in the environmental world, in the marketing world, in the global world. So would you give us a sense of who you are, what you're about, and why in the world would you want to give a TEDxAsheville talk? What's going on with that?
It's a process. Putting a TED Talk together is a process, many rewrites, but I think that's life, right? We co-create together, and we're working together to make this talk happen. I live in Asheville. I'm deeply connected with this region and have a passion for the outdoors, for conservation, for the environment. So a lot of the stories that I tell and the experiences I have are on the trail, either hiking or mountain biking or working with the Carolina Mountain Club, which has been a great organization that I hooked up with a few years ago. And just, hands-on conservation and being outdoors, is soul food for anyone that spends time outdoors. So I'm about that. I'm about community. I'm about how do we do what we do better? How do we show up for one another? Part of this talk is coming out of our experience that we had here when Helene ripped through the mountains and re-sculpted some of the mountains and rechanneled rivers and creeks, and the devastation for that, which was huge. I mean, not just in property, but over 100 people died, and that's something we hadn't experienced here before. But what happened in that is, we showed up for one another. So in the midst of the destruction, in the midst of all the mess, we showed up in ways that we hadn't perhaps showed up before, or maybe had, but also discovered ways that we showed up for one another that we didn't know were there. And so on the Appalachian Trail, and this is true of a lot of long hiking trails, when you do something for someone, you give them a ride, you cook them a meal, you share a piece of clothing, it's called trail magic. And it's that moment when someone shares what he or she has and the other receives. And that's part of the culture of a long trail, because when you're going on something like the Appalachian Trail, which is over 2,000 miles long, and you're doing the whole thing or parts of it, I mean, you're out there doing your own thing. It's you, your body, your mind, whatever goals you got personally, but you're also in community. And you don't usually get through a through hike or a long trail through hike just by yourself, right? You've got other people that are helping you make that happen. You're developing relationships along the way, and you're receiving and giving help when it's needed. So that's something that I don't only see on the trail, but I saw it in Helene, right? Where folks were stepping up for one another, and giving what they had. And then folks like me at times was giving what I had, but I was also receiving, right, from other people who had when I didn't have. And I think kind of put a bow around this, and this is why this is truly me, or to give you a better idea of who I am. I feel deeply like a lot of us do. I think that we're sort of living in a time, it is a messy time. We've got big, big system things going on, climate, the economy, social, political, whatever. And it doesn't matter where you stand on any of that politically or what you believe in, you're feeling it one way or the other. We're all in this. And when Helene hit, it didn't care where you lived or who you were. Wind will blow where wind wants to blow, and water will go where water wants to go. And so I think we're all in this wild kind of churning water right now as a people on this wild, beautiful planet of ours. And I think that we're being pushed up against a lot of pinch points that, quite frankly, cause a lot of us to delve into cynicism and hopelessness, anger and fear. And all that's real. I go through those feelings myself. But I think the antidote is action. It's being with and for one another. And this isn't rocket science, and it's nothing new, right? I think as a human species, the reason we're successful, if you will, is that this is part of our DNA. There's other parts of our DNA. We can be jerks, we can be greedy, we can be petty, we can be egocentric, we can be all that stuff. And I raise my hand, right? I'm part of that family too. But what I kind of call this trail magic muscle that we have, it has to be developed, it has to be supported, and we have to practice it. And I think now, in the midst of all of this wildness that we're in, for me personally, sort of the antidote to my own cynicism is to be active, to be giving and receiving, to show up in places that there's a need, whatever that need might be. For me, it's the trail work I do with the Carolina Mountain Club, right? That's a real cathartic way of being with other people. That's an organization that's 102 years old. It's all volunteer run. I mean, and it does wonderful things. Is it saving the world? No, right? But is anybody saving the world, right? But it's action.
When you say trail magic, my mind moves to mysticism, moves
Mm,
to mystery.
hmm.
Also, you said you go into the woods, you go to the Appalachian Trail or to any of the other places in the world to wander in what we call wilderness. It's soul food, you say.
Mm.
Magic, mysticism, mystery, soul food. How do all of those overlap? And how does it all fit together in terms of informing behavior?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, when I was in Japan a year and a half ago, the famous Japanese poet Basho, and you've probably know some of his work because he traveled around Japan. This is 300, 400 years ago, and he's one of their famous haiku poets, Japanese haiku poets. So I'm very much I draw sustenance from folks that write about that experience in a mythopoetic way. That's that gives me a different way of looking at and experiencing, and also, if you will, reminds me that this is innately human. This is a shared experience that we have. He's a Japanese guy writing about this hundreds of years ago, and yet it's relevant. I feel it. So there's the mythopoetic piece to that, hand in hand, though, with the actual action itself. So for me, the magic, if we look at trail magic, isn't something that's a concept or a thought or a feeling. It only comes into being by action. This is where I become more practical in a way and more mundane in a way, to use that word, because I believe that the magic happens when we show up through the action. So there's the poetry, yes. There's I can write about it, I can photograph it. I love to photograph the outdoors. I love to photograph nature. I'm inspired when I look at some of my photos. I'm inspired when I look at the photos of other people that are better than I am to tell those stories. But the difference here, James, I think, and this is sort of my message around this, is it's the action of the trail magic that causes the magic to happen.
Magic is often thought of as sleight of hand, the magician. The kind of magic you're talking about is close to ordinary.
Yes. And the sleight of hand is important too, right? Because this is also very much a part of being a human being and how we communicate and how we influence and how we help get people from here to there. Tom Sawyer gets everybody to paint the fence for him, right? So there's part of that aspect to this. But I'm really talking about sort of an honest, and it's innate part of I say our human DNA, that we are compelled to share with one another and compelled to receive from one another. That's a beautiful thing about being human. Not all species can come together like we do. We're capable of doing crazy, awful things, absolutely, but we're also capable of doing wonderful, amazing things with one another. And the reason I think trail magic on the trail, it's like it's a special moment. One of the things, if one is spending a lot of time in nature in that way on a long hiking trail, after a while, the food you're eating becomes very boring, right? Becomes very predictable, very boring, very bland. And when someone offers you an orange, and this will happen, and oranges are sought after when people are hiking on the trail, it's magic. The feeling is, wow, the excitement. I'm so excited to have an orange. Well, who does that, right? In our modern world, who gets excited about an orange? But when you're out there, out in the woods, on that long trail, putting in miles during the day, eating power bars or basically, carving up on pasta or whatever, an orange is special because it's perishable. It's been brought in from somewhere else and it's handed to you where you can't easily get an orange or carry an orange. And so magic then is that moment of something that's special and different. And that's also offered to me with no desire for anything in return. It's the simple act of the giving. Now, my receiving is part of the magic too, because if there's no one to receive, then the giving has no purpose. So it's a relationship. And I think that's part of the magic of human relationship that right now I want to keep reminding myself about. Because the draw to cynicism, to greed, to an inflated ego, to not caring or being all about myself, that's very much a part of our culture, right? So I think this is an anecdote to that. And when people are on the trail, the Appalachian Trail doesn't care either where you come from, where you went to school, what your 401k is. It's going to treat everybody the same, right?
Expanding from the Appalachian Trail, there are many trails all over the world. Could it be that we are all on the trail and that trail magic isn't exclusive to one walking the path in the wilderness, but walking the path of life?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, great question, observation, statement you just made. I mean, this is, to me, it's a metaphor that this takes place on the trail because we're all journeying together through life. I think this is part of our culture, I think, maybe it's part of our generation. there is this sense that the self-made person or the super person can do it all by him or herself. And there are people out there in the culture that would seem to show that, oh, what we should achieve. That's what we should aspire to. But the vast majority of us live with and depend upon one another. And that to me is the real beauty or the real part of being human that I want to capture, to affirm, and to hold on to. And also, James, the journey, I know, you've had 10 years of this radio show, someone every week. You've been journeying with heaps of people, right? And which makes it a lot more interesting and fun, right? Than doing it by oneself. So, I mean, the life you're leading and is a wonderful example that we don't do this by ourselves, and our life is richer. So when I'm in community with people, whatever that looks like, either in a volunteer activity or a spiritual community, a group of friends, whatever that is important. That's a piece of belonging and connectivity. And I think we're living in such a wild time that wants to pull us apart. And we are living in a real time where our technology allows us to isolate and to be by ourselves and to be lonely and there's a lot of toxicity to that. That's not good for the human body. I mean, you and I are using technology right now to talk, and I see you, and this is great. But how even more fulfilling would this be if I were in your room right now and you and I could feel the same air, could feel the same temperature, we could smell each other, for goodness sake. That's the human connection, right? And I think that's we're in danger. We're always in danger, but we're in danger of losing that. And efficiency will do that. Efficiency of technology, having other people solve our problems for us. And the antidote, I think, is being active, being present, being with and for one another, and it's hands-on, it's tangible.
When you talk about this trail magic, another place my mind goes, it goes to the old Disney cartoons when the wizard shows up with the magic wand and the thing flashes in. I'm also thinking that magic can go both ways. The world is disruptive. You can choose to practice magic in ways that may not necessarily contribute to the welfare of those around you, to put it generously. You can also practice magic, the basic human interaction, noticing people, listening to people, that kind of magic. You can go both ways on it. So magic isn't just limited to one side. It's about the choice that one makes. And that choice is, in a way, the magic wand. My wand is the choice. I move in whatever direction I choose to move in. I am the wizard. You are the wizard. We are wizards amongst wizards, but not mystical wizards, just humans able to make choices that seem to deserve the name magic.
Well, let me hit on the dual side of this, which is great you're bringing that up. During Helene, a lot of us discovered that we had it within ourselves to show up for one another, to be there for one another. Folks came in from around the country to bring supplies to help rebuild houses. I mean, the Amish were famously here for a lot of Helene, helping to rebuild houses because that's what they know how to do. Am I naive to think that there weren't people also taking advantage of Helene who were perhaps using services or hoarding supplies or profiting off of a crisis? Absolutely. People do that. What happens oftentimes in a crisis is some people will inflate their prices, right? So that might be the other side of the magic. Oh yeah, I've got something I can offer you, but by the way, it's going to cost a lot more now because I can get it from you, right? So that's the cynic's play, right? Absolutely. So are those folks on the journey with us that might behave that way? Of course there are. I mean, they're The Appalachian Trail is full of all sorts of people. And there's always a case during the season where there's at least one person that, for whatever reason, is misbehaving one way or the other, right? That's so those folks are there, and that's part of it. However, I believe that the majority of us, if we're encouraged and reminded that we get down the trail better with one another, then we practice that magic that's generative, that builds community, that is heartfelt, that's genuine. And that's not naive. I'm 60 years old. I've seen one or two things. So I'm not talking, out of some pie in the sky thing here. Um, I've experienced, like a lot of us who have lived this long in life, some real hard stuff. But I've also experienced the unasked for and unexpected compassion and support and camaraderie of people that I didn't even know. That's innately human.
And I think we have the choice to contribute in all kinds of ways. And I'm speaking from yet another ordinary rock, really. I've made choices in both directions over the years. I'm no saint by any means and don't pretend to be. I'm just moving through life aware that when I take the wizard magic in the direction of harmony, which is to say, notice somebody, recognize them, offer a bit of kindness, which is within my range, things tend to work out a little bit better than if I'm picking their wallet from their pocket or stealing their iPhone. Neither, I will say, I've done, but I do know it happens. So we have choices. I think choices are important. I'm also thinking about the environment and how the environment invites us to be part of what it's doing rather than us having that much influence over it.
I think a lot of us are feeling, and once again, it doesn't matter where you sit politically, spiritually, or whatever, you're probably feeling sort of cultural angst and uncertainty. And that impacts us. We feel that in our body, we feel it in our mind, we feel it in our spirit. It can cause us to feel anxiety, to feel fear. The book Dune, the great line, "Fear is the mind killer." It's a wonderful line. And this is what fear does to us. So the antidote, of course, to fear and isolation is to be with one another, but it's an active with. It's not a philosophy. It's not a theory. It's action. And we do that already. This is nothing groundbreaking or new. But like a muscle, I think that we want to find ways of practicing it and also having those of us who have a desire to speak to that, to remind one another that we have that choice. Because you're absolutely right. We have the choice, but the environment, like you said, has great influence on what we choose. And I go back to Helene. Were there instances of people looting from businesses that had been damaged? Yes. Was it widespread and chaotic? No. And so for the person that had his or her business looted, that's painful and that's real. And I'm not going to say it's not. On the other hand, there wasn't widespread breakdown of the social order when, where we were all going at one another and grabbing whatever the other person had. And James, when Helene hit and we're without power, we're without water, we had no idea what had taken place. The rest of the world knew what had happened here. We had no idea what had happened here. So to experience that kind of event, I was without potable water for 54 days. Now, I live in the city of Asheville. I live in a city. Now, that was an inconvenience. I can live with an inconvenience. But it also tells you that the breakdown, when the environment breaks down, and instead of, going at each other, we found ways of supporting and being with and for one another.
And what about that experience for you? How did that play out? What did you learn that you didn't know before going through that experience?
That's a great question. So I'm a Boy Scout, so be prepared. I can take care of myself. I've always known that. But what I learned in Helene is that it's not something you do by yourself. And so the great sort of lesson for me was that I needed my neighbors. I needed folks giving me information. Here's water, here's food. I needed people coming in from the outside with resources and sharing those resources. So I found in Helene that you don't do it by yourself. When I was without water, I was taking showers with cold bottled water for a few days and listened to the White Stripes so that Jack White could scream at me so I could get through the cold shower. But fortunately, a few days into that, friends that have a farm in Madison County that had a well said, "Hey, come out here and shower," right? And I kind of jokingly say, it's bad when you live in Asheville and you've got to go to a farm in Madison County to take a shower and do your laundry. That's the realization when you're, and I think this is what's interesting to me, James. You asked who I am in the beginning of this time together. Well, I'm a guy that's grown up in a culture where I've been able to accomplish a lot of things, get a lot of the things that I've wanted, get along pretty well, right? I don't have a lot of adversity in my life. And I'm used to going it alone. I'm used to having, if I want something to happen, I'm used to making it happen. That doesn't mean I've been successful in everything and I haven't had disappointment. But what Helene showed me was, dude, you can't do this by yourself. You're part of this human experience in this community of people, some of whom got it a lot worse than you did by no fault of their own, because the storm didn't have any of us in mind when it came. It just came. So I think for me, James, this realization that the false narrative in our culture is the self-made, successful hero, whatever, out there doing it by him or herself. And we have a lot of those people out there that give us that message. But the real gem, the real magic, if you will, is that when we're in community and we do it together, we truly, truly do need one another to get through the real storm, but also get through the symbolic storms. And the stuff that we're dealing with as a human species right now is going to require that we practice that muscle, that we develop that strength of being with and for one another. And this isn't some kumbaya holding hands and singing around a campfire, although that's good and fun and important. This is practical. This is, how do we live in community? How do we be with and for one another, not only in the midst of a storm like Helene, but in all aspects of our civic life, our community, our communal life. And I think this country right now, quite frankly, we're going to have to look at some real new ways of being with one another, because a lot of what kind of was holding us together is very quickly being torn apart.
We do require help from others. And yet loneliness crawls under our skin like a live thing, as the poet Charles Wright said. What about loneliness in this environment that requires so much assistance from others? How does that thread through all of this?
My dad was a pediatrician, and when I was feeling at times down or somewhat melancholic, he would say, go for a walk. He was right most of the time. The very act of getting out and going and walking would often break the cycle or help me along the way of breaking the cycle. Now, I'm not talking about someone who's clinically really down and needs more than just a walk, so don't let me be misinterpreted. But in times where I was feeling down for whatever reason, he often prescribed a walk, and he was right. It's the very action. There's an action component to this, breaking the cycle of loneliness. I go back to the Carolina Mountain Club. We've got trail crews out every day of the week working on trail. Does that save the world? No. The trails are always being worked on, and they'll never be not worked on. So in some ways, it's a futile activity, but it's a very important activity for people that hike trails, for the local businesses that require outdoor recreation, etc. But more important than that, it's being with other people around a collective activity that's hands-on. It's in our bodies, it's outdoors in nature. There's laughter, there's learning, there's grunting, there's sweating, there's all that. That's the antidote to loneliness, right? It's finding those places or things or whatever they are. But to me, there's also an action component to it. And I think folks have to find for themselves, what does that look like? And I think, our brains, I think, are wired to really love social media and love our computer screens. That's why they work. It's like the reason that we can drive cars is because we can drive cars. I mean, that's why there are cars, is because we can drive cars. If we couldn't drive cars, there wouldn't be cars. So the reason that we have computers is they work for us. Their social media works for us. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. So the antidote is to get off all that stuff, right? And that's hard. Once again, I go back to this example of you and me meeting by Zoom. I can see you and I can hear your voice, but this is a very, very, very watered down version of human interaction. Whereas if you and I are in the same room right now, the experience would be very different. And I think that's part of the problem with our technology. It's very efficient. I'm glad we have this technology so that you and I can talk, you being in the Philippines, me being in Asheville, but this is no replacement for true connection.
It may be no replacement. Is it expansion of true connection?
Perhaps, but you remember the great dream of the internet. It would bring democracy to the world, right? And look where it is now. So perhaps it's done some of that, but look at what else it's done. So it's like anything with a tool. I'm a big Stephen Covey fan, and he says you can be efficient with things, but not with people. We have to be effective with one another. So many of our tools allow us to be more efficient, which is great. But I think a lot of our loneliness is because we've isolated ourselves from one another. And the technology helps us in many ways to do that. That doesn't mean if I've got a great life going on and I've got community, that hopping on a Zoom meeting with you in the Philippines makes me feel lonely, because it doesn't. This is great to connect with you. But the technology, if that's all I have, well, I don't know. I think it's a watered down version.
We're coming around to the individual again, and to the magic, and to the wizard's wand, and to choice. If I choose to stay digitalized in front of the screen and never go anywhere, maybe the screen pulls me in, maybe the screen hypnotizes me, maybe I'm unaware of what's outside, then I likely will become more and more contained in a self that has nothing else, and then I will start to seem lonely. If I use the screen and the technology and the phones and the conversations to then set up opportunities for interaction, like you and I will interact when I come back to Asheville March 1st, this conversation here will set up interactions that we wouldn't otherwise have if we just met in Asheville without this conversation. So it's dramatically about choice, I think. And then we come to the individual. I can't make myself alone, but at the end of the day, I do have to make decisions that are exclusively my own. So there's the aloneness of the decision based on the exposure of the community that is at play here. And somehow there's a dance between those. Trail magic. I have to decide to give you the orange. You have to decide to give me the chocolate. We have made individual decisions that then support the collective. So there's this dance between those two.
Well, amen. I mean, and about the choices, I think, and you go back to environment once again. So it's both and. So community helps me let's say and I'm gonna just use big words here, a quote unquote functional healthy community, whatever that means, right? Whatever that looks like. Let's say that's going on right now. Well, if I'm in that community, it's going to inform the types of choices I make because I'm within a community that's quote unquote functioning, healthy, happy, wonderful, whatever it is, right? However one defines that. And if I'm in a community like that, then my choices will be formed and helped shape by that community. If I'm in a different community where that's not happening, my choices will be formed and shaped by that community. So, like you said, it's this individual within community, and it's this dance. To be Taoist, if you will, we are the crest of the wave, right? You and I reach these individual crests of the wave of the large sea. We present ourselves now, we go back down, but we're part of this larger ocean. So that's part of the wildness, isn't it, of being human, because we're very aware of our individual self. But what's also even more profoundly true is that although you and I are two very different people with different experiences and different taste, etc., for the most part, how you and I feel and interpret experience the world is very, very similar. That's our human connection and our humanness. We feel the world in a very similar way. So we are unique, but we're also not unique at all. We're special on one hand and absolutely not special at all on the other.
That is quite true. And one of the things we seldom think of when we think of our humanness, or I don't often hear people refer to themselves as wild. They will say, let's be wild. But the actual fact of it is, as animals, we are wild.
Yes.
There is no such thing as tame. There may be such a thing as organization. There may be such a thing as digital space, but we are wild animals roaming the earth in our wildness. And when you think of it like that, rather than those other animals or the wild ones, which implies we're tame, but we are hardly tame. If you look at how we live on the earth, the way we function, and you're referencing it, oh my God, it's disrupted right now. The actual world that we claim we want to save isn't disrupted at all. There's nothing disrupted about it. Interviewed the world. I said, well, welcome world to Twice 5 Miles Radio. Do you feel disruptive? The world would say, well, no, as a matter of fact, I don't feel disruptive at all. I've been spinning around the sun for millions of years. It seems rather normal to me. And then the world might say to me, but do you feel disruptive, Mr. Navé? Do you feel disruptive? And I would go, my God, I do feel disruptive. And the world might say, well, you don't need to save me. Thank you very much for thinking about me. I would recommend that you save yourself. When you say save the world, you're not directing that need in the direction of me, the world spinning. You're directing that need in the direction of you and your group. The wild animals called human probably need to save themselves. And if they don't, the world might say to me, if I'm interviewing it, that's okay with me. The birds won't notice when you're gone.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think we have it within our capacity to do that for ourselves. We also have it within our capacity to do the other. I mean, that's part of the dilemma of being human. We're capable of doing horrific things to one another. That's been proven through history and through our own lived experience. But we're also capable of doing amazing, wonderful things with and for one another and with strangers, people who we don't even know. What message do I want to preach? I want to tag the reality. You're right. If I look at the universe, even to go beyond the world, if you were to interview the universe, I think the universe would say, what humans? I'm not even aware that they're here, right? I mean, that's part of the wildness of our own existence, is that we are at once amazingly here and present and filling up the room, and yet in the vastness of the cosmos, great minds like an Albert Einstein or great people like Jane Goodall, the universe doesn't even know they're there because we're so tiny. Metaphysically, one might argue with me and say, Dave, we're all part of something and we are known. And I wouldn't argue with the person if they felt that way. But just to come back to this argument about who's responsible and where do we put our energy, I think you're right. The earth was here before we were here. It's probably going to be here after. My project, if you will, in my life is how do we as human beings do it better? How do we get along with one another?
Can we define better?
Well, that's a good question. I think the conversation would have to be talking about what does that look like? I think better means freaking showing up for one another regardless of who the other is. And that's hard for us. It's hard for me. We might think, oh, I'll show up for anybody. Sometimes folks say, well, all you need is love. And I'm like, okay, but I don't love everybody, James. I don't. But I hope that I would show up for them. And I think that's the difference of what I'm talking here, because there's some people in this world that I might intellectually or philosophically get to a place where I can say, oh, well, we're all just part of the cosmic sea. But when I look at the other hand of what he or she may do that causes great harm and destruction to other people, I have a hard time loving them, definitely not liking them. But when you experience an event like Helene or you're on the Appalachian Trail together, you're not asking whether or not I love this person. You're simply with another human being that's on the journey together and you're showing up for one another. And I think that to me is a subtle shift here and a different way of looking at this. And so I'm not about how do we love one another. I'm about how do we simply show up and work with one another? What are those common pieces of the human experience or the human project that we all agree on? For example, I think most people who have children care deeply about children and want to do the right thing about children, about how they raise children, how they take care of children. And collectively, folks that care about children, if they're brought together collectively, can advocate for the best things for children. You know, right now, quite frankly, there's things going on in our country that I think are not good for our children. And that's coming from policy, from politics, from whatever. But if we were to pull most people together and say, okay, we have all these differences, but are children important to you? Yes. Okay, well, let's talk about what that looks like. But when we stop having that conversation and we stop raising that as a collective conversation, we start to assume that each of us has different views or different ways or different values. We may have different strategies, but I think a lot of the values that are the same. They're innately human.
Love. All you need is love, you say, or some people say. Could it be that love, this word that we use, is our attempt to understand the impossible? When I say love, I love people. That's one kind of love. But there's the love that comes with just simply being aware that we're contained. And that's another kind of love. I'm held by something greater than myself that may or may not be able to identify me in a sentence. I am aware of my place in this cosmic infinity. So that's a sense of love. So love is maybe not something that we need as much as it is just simply something that we're aware of because it exists in such grand totality that we're not quite sure what to do with it.
Perhaps, and maybe it's both and. So yes, if I hear you right, I might sit in a place and go, I have this deep sort of cosmic love for humanity. And I do have that. I'll feel that. I'll go, all of us are really kind of bumbling our way through life. We're small beings that have a short lifespan, and most of us die having not really figured it out. Maybe, hopefully, we had a good time along the way. So there's a bit of compassion, if you will, for everyone in the room that I would feel these are my fellow human beings. There's that perhaps larger sort of philosophical or heartfelt love for all humanity. Yes. I think there's also, and the love is a verb thing, right? So it's the action. How do I act on that? How do I put that into practice? And I'm really big on the practice piece of this because I think it can be tempting. And I experienced this a lot in my graduate work in California. Really good people doing a lot of work that was important, but a lot of it was sort of work on themselves to where they came to a place of, well, I'm one with the cosmos, I'm one with everybody else. We all feel love. And they didn't do for anybody else. They were really absorbed in their own thing. And they weren't out there volunteering at the shelter or building trails or standing up for some political thing. They weren't putting themselves out there. Now, there were many people that were, so don't let me sound like I'm doing a large brushstroke here. But I think what can happen too is that we can self-select to this sort of comfortable place of cosmic love. And then I surround myself with people that feel that as well. But there are a lot of people out there that don't dance that dance. And I think a lot of our divide culturally is often with those folks that don't necessarily dance the dance that way. So I think, I don't hear you saying this, but I think some of us can think, oh, I have this sort of cosmic love for all of humanity, and the work is done now. That's, to me, crap. Right?
Well, I'm not saying that I have cosmic love for humanity. I'm just saying that sense of expansion is described by the term love. So we're manufacturing the word love, trying to understand the largesse of that's all of the stuff that's around us.
Right, right.
And so it's not about whether I love everybody or not. I don't. I contain, as Walt Whitman said, multitudes, and every emotion that exists in me. I love, I hate, I have joy, I have sadness, I have this, that, and the other. It's an atmosphere that floats around inside of my imagination, my existence. And so hate and love are intertwined. They're very close to each other. And hate and joy, love and joy, sadness and happiness, they're floating around in this great cauldron of me. And one pops up here and another one pops up here. And I look out beyond me and think, well, the only thing I can truly love, and I can choose my wizard's wand to love it, is I love the atmosphere of who I am. And I'm willing to be in that atmosphere, love or hate and all of the rest.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yes, I love that. I love the cauldron, going back to the cauldron and the wizard's cauldron.
Well, if you have a wizard, you got to have a cauldron. Come on.
Well, yeah, I love it. It's also the cosmic dance, right? I mean, we're talking about the dance. And did you ever dance contra? That was big in Asheville.
I love contra dancing from a distance, but when I get in the contra dance, I go 2 rounds and I guess it's my ADD, but I get bored. I'm like, okay, I've heard this before. We're going to spin one more time.
I hear
your
you.
Partner. Well, here's another one now. I know a lot of people love it, and there's no shade on contra. I think it's fantastic. It's a great music. But poor old me, I'm like, oh God, I gotta do this again. I need to go look at a bird.
Well, I get it. I get it. For me, the what I wanted to share about contra dancing is, and this is true of any couples dancing, is you have to have form and there has to be tension. And in contra, you balance and you swing, you balance and you swing. And the dance is the most fun when the person I'm dancing with, when they meet me with equal force, then we can do the wild moves. If I overpower them, or they underpower, I underpower, and they overpower, it doesn't work. So the dance has to be mutual in that way. And then it's beautiful and then it's fun. And then you can go see the birds afterwards. But
Well, again, I appreciate what you said, and maybe I'll give it a try from that point of view. Anything else you would like to say before we close?
gosh, just that this has flown by. It's a lot of fun talking with you, James. And, thanks for having me on. And you asked great questions and you've got me thinking, you got me excited. And you've said a few things that always causes me to think and pause and think through what I'm saying. And so I appreciate that. This has been a great therapy session for me. So thank you.
And your TEDx Asheville talk, are you looking forward to that?
Oh, absolutely. There's going to be a stage of 12 of us, and I think I've met all of the speakers, and they're wonderful, and their stories and their talks are all very different. I mean, I'm just excited to hear what they all have to say. And it really truly is a privilege and an honor to be part of it and part of the Asheville TEDx. The team does an amazing job, and like everything in Asheville, it's craft, it's quality, it's creative, and it's intentional. So what they're creating for us is an intentional experience, and I'm looking forward to that.
Barry will tell you her idea is to create 12 TED Talks that will all get accepted into the big TED platform
Yes,
for global viewing. And they're making
that's
a
it.
TV show as much as they are producing a TEDx Asheville talk for the audience.
That's right. Well, and she's so marvelous, as you know, as a producer and a dancer, and she choreographs this in such a beautiful way. So what I love is to see how all the different pieces come together. There's
Mhm.
magic. That's your magic right there.
Yeah. So, and one last thing, how do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, so the best way to get in touch with me is you can go on my LinkedIn if you're on LinkedIn. Also, go to my corporatecraft.net. That's corporatecraft.net. And that kind of gives you a little bit about who I am and the work that I do. And yeah, and if you want to reach out to me, send me an email there. I'd love to talk, and I love dialogue and communication and questions and whatever. So yeah, I'd love for people to connect with me.
Okay. Well, David Huff, thank you so much.
James, thanks, man. Good to see you.
So there you go, my friends. Thus concludes my conversation with David Huff. In the course of helping Barry choose these TEDx Asheville speakers, I've learned a lot from each person. And what I've mostly learned, and this is important to remember if you are trying to develop a TEDx talk, or if you're even thinking about how to go about doing that, not just a TEDx talk, but any talk. We have 12 speakers who will appear on the stage March 20th at Diana Wortham Theatre. Each person brings a particular style to the talk. There's no one way to go about being on stage, presenting the work you want people to hear. There are billions of ways to do it. Your way is as significant as my approach or the approach that David would take, or any of the other people who will be on the TEDx stage. Allegra Houston will be on the TEDx stage. Jennifer Pickering will be there as well. When you consider the power you have as an individual, and how that power, no matter how it's contained, how it's framed, no matter what your experiences are, that power sits there and it belongs to you. And that is what people are interested in. Now, true, they're interested in the big idea. As Ted says, ideas worth spreading. And yet, people are interested in something more than just your ideas or that one idea. They're interested in watching you or me or whomever happens to appear on the stage or in front of a group. It doesn't really matter if it's on a big stage or if you're giving a toast at a wedding or a nod to somebody at a birthday celebration. When you are up there you are allowing the people around you to see themselves in you, to reflect back some of the emotional areas they have, reflect that back to them by watching you reflect towards them, that reciprocal thing that goes on. So when you are thinking about your talks, and you have to stand up in front of anybody, and especially if you're afraid, and a lot of people are terrified of standing in front of a group of people and giving a talk. I'm terrified of going over the mountains. I can't cross Independence Pass in Colorado without falling apart. Other places as well. I don't even like to go up into tall buildings, really. So fear can be a factor. I still try to go up in the heights because I know it's a bit of a false fear. Same thing is true with stage work, being in front of people. It's not a false fear in the sense that you are not experiencing it, but the consequences standing in front of people don't exist like maybe you think they do. The fear of failure mostly, but when you get up in front of people, you're reflecting towards them who you are, and they're reflecting back toward you who you are. So there's less of a problem around the fear, and you just have to lean into the openness of it. And I wish I had more time to go on, but I did want to comment about these things as we close and move up to the top of the hour. Intimacy, intimacy. When you're developing your talk or when you're just there in a conversation, are you willing to let people see into you? Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. I hope you are maybe more than I am. However it is, intimacy. Thank you for tuning in to Twice 5 Miles Radio. I do appreciate it. I'm James Navé, and this is Provocative Conversations, and we are Twice 5 Miles Radio, broadcasting on WPVM-FM every weekend and KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio, every weekend. WPVM-FM is in Asheville. Cultural Energy Radio is in Taos. Thank you, Devine Dial, for managing WPVM-FM, Robin Collier and Mike Tilley for managing KCEI. I really, really do appreciate it. You can reach me, Navé, at jamesnavé.com, Navé spelled N-A-V-E, walterparks.com. If you'd like to hear more about Walter's music, that's right. Walter's the one who gives us the theme song. So thanks ever so much for tuning in. I do hope you come back sometime soon. Until then, maybe I'll catch you on that turnaround somewhere down the line.